Actually, I've got to apologize because I kind of procrastinated in preparing my remarks today, and I didn't realize what a kind of a daunting task this was going to be. So basically what follows here is more of an anarchist criticism of civilization. But just so you know what Anarcho-Primitivism is, it's a trend within anarchism that advocates the destruction of civilization to realize what they would consider a truly anarchist society. Also, the tenets that of anarchism that apply to humans, they apply that to the rest of the biological community and to the earth as well. So, freedom from unjust authority. All right. So basically, what I see as the difference between Marxist communism and anarchism is that Marxists believe that communist society must be organized and enforced through the state, including the use of forced collectivization if necessary. Anarchists, on the other hand, believe humanity is naturally cooperative and communities will form effortlessly where they're needed if they're not being violently suppressed. It seems that the anarchist theory, to be justified, it requires a rather large precedent to rest on. Marxist theory requires no precedent, as their society will be imposed on humanity by an enlightened vanguard. Some anarchists use the Paris Commune, anarchist Spain, or May '68 as this precedent, but it seems that a true precedent needs to be a long-lasting and sustainable one in order to hold any water in the battle of ideas. Has there ever been a long-lasting society based on cooperation and sharing with a minimal amount of coercion? Yes, there has. In 1492, Christopher Columbus got lost and ran into a continent he didn't know existed. It was there that a new people and an unfamiliar way of life were made known to the Europeans. When Columbus first arrived and encountered the Arawak Indians, he said, "The Indians are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. When you ask for something they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with everyone." Immediately after that, he goes on to write about how he enslaved a whole bunch of them. Dale Van Every writes in the book The Disinherited, "The foundation principle of Native American government had always been the rejection of government. The freedom of the individual was regarded by practically all Indians north of Mexico as a canon infinitely more precious than the individual's duty to his community or nation. This anarchist attitude ruled all behavior, beginning with the smallest social unit, the family. The Indian parent was constitutionally reluctant to discipline his children. Their very exhibition of self-will was accepted as favorable indication of maturing character." So Europeans at the time believed that social stratification was just an unavoidable fact of life. The discovery of social systems free from poverty and rigid hierarchical government turned this assumption on its head. The desirability of this way of life must have been readily apparent to the rank and file of early American settlers. Michel Guillaume Jean de Crèvecoeur, in Letters from an American Farmer, wrote the following: "There must be in their social bonds something singularly captivating and far superior to anything to be boasted among us. For thousands of Europeans are Indians, and we have no examples of even one of those aborigines having from choice become Europeans." Ben Franklin made this even more clear when he said, "No European who has tasted savage life can afterwards bear to live in our societies." The power structure of European civilization quickly set about destroying the Native American societies. When they were not killed, they were simply subjected to the cross and the plow, removed from their land, and their societies crumbled. The European power structure did this partially out of want for the natives' land and resources, and partly because a successful egalitarian society cannot be tolerated by an exploitative one. If workers and slaves are aware that their position in society is not the only imaginable state of affairs, how long can exploitation endure? Before long, the natives were exterminated and marginalized. Until now, they are largely thought of as a romantic element of the past and nothing more. Today, we face a situation in which the exploitative ideology of civilization permeates society so universally that it is largely invisible. No alternatives exist, we live at the end of history, and everything that happened before was only in preparation for this. Or so the story goes. For some, the memory of the egalitarian societies of Native America would not fade so quickly. And what was more remarkable was that as civilization marched to the ends of the earth, similar societies were discovered in all the untouched places. Furthermore, scientific discoveries would reveal that mankind was not a mere 6,000 years old, as some would have to say that the Bible would have us believe, but at least 100,000 years old, maybe even up to 3 million years old. And that our ancestors lived very similarly to the indigenous people of the Americas and to the world. Anthropology and archaeology reveal much about humanity that has been forgotten by the civilized world. Anthropologist Richard Lee said, "Before the rise of the state and the entrenchment of social inequality, people lived for millennia in small-scale kin-based social groups, in which the core institutions of economic life included collective or common ownership of land and resources, generalized reciprocity in the distribution of food, and relatively egalitarian political relations." Chris Hartman expounds upon this. People shared with and helped each other with no rulers and no ruled, no rich and no poor. Lee echoes the phrase used by Frederick Engels in the 1880s to describe this state of affairs, primitive communism. The point is of enormous importance. Our species is over 100,000 years old. For 95% of this time, it has not been characterized at all by many forms of behavior ascribed to human nature today. There is nothing built into our biology that makes present-day societies the way they are. The idea that the lives of these early band societies and later tribal societies were nasty, brutish, and short, to borrow from Hobbes' phrase, is fictitious. Richard Lee, in studying the Kung Indians who lived in the radical desolation of the Kalahari Desert, found that this band of hunter-gatherers satisfied their needs easily and only needed to work about 3 to 4 hours a day. Studies of other hunter-gatherer tribes in Arnhem Land, Australia, by McCarthy and MacArthur, and the Mabudi of the African Congo by Colin Turnbull reflect similar findings. Anthropologist Marshall Salins famously declared hunter-gatherer society to be the original affluent society. So it seems our precedent for an anarchist society is established, but the question remains, what are the differences between our society and tribal and band society that make ours so stratified and theirs so egalitarian? If we look at tribal and band societies, the most distinguishing features that they have in common are, 1, that the social unit is much smaller than in civilized society, B, that they are lacking in large-scale systems of technology, and C, domestication is minimal if not entirely absent, and social stratification seems to increase along with the amount of domestication present. Now, we shouldn't just assume that these features are necessarily the cause of their egalitarian tendencies, but there is evidence to suggest that they are causally related. We should be able to look at human history and see where major shifts in social organization occurred. In this way, we may be able to deduce their causes. Chris Hartman, writing in A People's History of the World, says, "The first big changes in people's lives and ideas began to occur only about 10,000 years ago. People took up a new way of making a livelihood in certain parts of the world, notably the Fertile Crescent region of the Middle East. They learned to cultivate crops instead of relying upon nature to provide them with vegetable foodstuffs, and to domesticate animals instead of simply hunting them. It was an innovation which was to transform their whole way of living. One way it did this was by increasing the birth rate of tribal societies. In a hunter-gatherer society, basically, women need to be able to carry their young with them, so they would usually space children out for at least 3 years, or 3, even up to 5 years, until the kid was able to walk by himself. Also, I've read that a diet consisting largely of grains increases your fertility rate. This, combined with the new sedentary lifestyle of some horticultural societies, led to the first villages and the first stores of food, which provided incentive for other tribes to raid them. And as Hartman says, war virtually unknown among hunter-gatherers, was endemic among many horticultural peoples. Still, most horticultural societies managed to retain a largely non-stratified social existence. This is the state in which Europeans found many Native American tribes, who often combined nomadic hunting and gathering with smaller-scale horticulture.